Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, May 28, 2024. The presidential race comes to the site of former President Donald Trump's hush money trial in a more straightforward way, with spokespeople for the President Joe Biden reelection campaign and the Donald Trump campaign holding news conferences in New York City. Democratic National Committee announces a fix to make sure that President Biden qualifies for the general election ballot in Ohio, whose deadline is earlier than the DNC convention in Chicago. Their solution, a virtual DNC delegate roll call to officially nominate the president in time. Libertarian Party's national convention concludes with Oliver Chase, a former U.S. Senate candidate in Georgia, nominated for president after both Donald Trump and the independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. appealed to the delegates. We'll talk about the Libertarian Party convention with Politico's politics reporter Brittany Gibson. Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson Daniel Hagari says an Israeli airstrike that killed two senior Hamas leaders in Gaza could not have caused the fire that spread to a tent area that killed dozens of civilians. And it's possible that Hamas had weapons stored near there because there were secondary explosions. We'll hear from him and a White House spokesperson. Spain's prime minister announces his country has recognized Palestine as an independent country. So did Norway and Ireland today. White House Deputy National Security Advisor discusses whether Russian assets will be seized to help Ukraine defend against Russia's military assaults. And Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff talks about the benefits of exercise on mental health, especially for young people. Story from Associated Press: President Joe Biden's campaign on Tuesday showed up outside former President Donald Trump's New York City criminal hush money trial with actor Robert De Niro and a pair of former police officers in an effort to refocus the presidential race on the former president's role in the January 6, 2021 U.S. Capitol insurrection. It was a sharp about-face for Biden's team, which had largely ignored the trial since it began 6 weeks ago and is now looking to capitalize on its drama-filled closing moments, sending the Goodfellas actor and the first responders who were at the Capitol on January 6th. Biden's campaign had been wary about feeding into Trump's argument that his criminal trials were the result of politically motivated prosecutions. But ultimately, it decided to engage because its message about the stakes of the election was struggling to break through the intense focus on the trial. That was from Associated Press. Michael Tyler, the Biden reelection campaign communications director, led off the news conference.
We're not here today because of what's going on over there. We're here today because you all are here. And so we are proud. We are glad that you're all here this morning. We're here primarily because of the threat that Donald Trump poses to the United States of America and to our democracy. We are, of course, grateful to have two brave officers, Michael Fanone and Harry Dunn, who defended our democracy and our Capitol against the violent mob that Trump incited on January 6, 2021 here with us. And of course, we are happy to have Robert De Niro, a native New Yorker who can spot BS a mile away and isn't afraid to call it out. So the contrast here pretty much writes itself. As we speak, Donald Trump's somewhere fighting for himself, maybe taking a power nap. And we've seen him for weeks and for months now. We've seen the ramblings of an unhinged, power-hungry, self-centered man, both here at Mar-a-Lago, on Truth Social, wherever he may be. But the thing is, this isn't new for Donald Trump. It's how he spent his 4 years in the White House. It's how he spent every moment since he lost the 2020 election. And in 1 month, Americans are going to have an opportunity to witness in prime time the clear contrast between Donald Trump, who's a chaos agent waging a self-obsessed campaign of revenge and retribution, go up against Joe Biden, who's a leader who fights for Americans every single day. As the president said when he challenged Trump to debate, the president has a list of things he'd like to talk to Trump about if Trump does in fact show up in Atlanta on June 27th. He wants to talk about why Donald Trump's the architect of the repeal of Roe v. Wade, why he wants to go even further in his second term, why he thinks the extreme state-level abortion bans are playing out brilliantly across the country. He wants to talk about Trump's embrace of political violence and the core threat he poses to our democracy. Lastly, he wants to talk about Trump's economic plans and how they'd make Trump and his rich friends richer at the expense of working families, just like he has his entire life.
Michael Tyler, Biden reelection campaign communications director, in a park in New York City across from the building where Republican presidential candidate and former President Donald Trump was in a courtroom for closing arguments in his hush money criminal trial. As Michael Tyler mentioned, actor Robert De Niro was there, along with two former U.S. Capitol Police officers. Associated Press writes the actor cast himself as the true New Yorker and mocked Trump's history of sometimes unsuccessful business ventures and self-promotion, saying Trump was looking to destroy the city. Here's part of what Robert De Niro said.
When Trump ran in 2016, it was like a joke. This buffoon running for president. No, never could happen. We'd forgotten the lessons of history that showed us other clowns who weren't taken seriously until they became vicious dictators. With Trump, we have a second chance, and no one is laughing now. This is the time to stop him by voting him out once and for all. We don't want to wake up after the election saying, "What, again?"
After Robert De Niro and the former U.S. Capitol Police officers and the Biden campaign communications director finished their news conference in New York City, spokespeople for the Donald Trump campaign came to the microphones, including senior advisor Jason Miller.
So the Biden folks have finally done it. After months of saying that politics had nothing to do with this trial, they showed up and made a campaign event out of a Lower Manhattan trial day for President Trump. In fact, Biden's cronies had a printed out campaign sign saying Biden-Harris. So why the change? Why is Joe Biden now making this a campaign event after months of weaponizing the legal system against President Trump? Because Joe Biden's numbers are in the tank. The headline for today in Politico very simply said, Dems in freakout over Joe Biden. Joe Biden is losing nationally, is losing in every single battleground state, and President Trump's numbers continue to rise. And the best that Biden can do is roll out a washed-up actor. And don't worry, my remarks will be shorter than the Irishman. I won't make you suffer for 3 hours. But the best they can do is roll out a washed-up actor. Last week, President Trump spoke in the Bronx, where had over 25,000 people show up to rally around him. And the best the Biden campaign could do was put out a web video with Robert De Niro. There is nothing behind the Biden campaign. Their numbers are in the toilet. Kamala Harris is a terrible alternative, and it's all an attempt to try to turn around the Biden campaign. Now, what's happening here in Manhattan? We're in closing arguments for the Biden trial. We've been here for 6 weeks. Nobody has said that President Trump did anything wrong. We have a highly conflicted judge with an unconstitutional gag order, and everybody sees this case for what it is. In fact, the New York Post this morning, with the headline from Jonathan Turley, as Trump trial comes to close, DA's flimsy case is nothing to brag about. Everybody knows this case is complete garbage. President Trump did nothing wrong. This is all politics. If you don't think this is politics, then why do the Democrats wheel out a retread like Robert De Niro to try to change the subject? You could see the look on the Biden campaign staffers' faces. They knew this was a bad idea. They didn't want to be here. But somebody at Central Command told them that everything is going down the tubes for Joe Biden.
Jason Miller, senior advisor to the Donald Trump presidential campaign at a news conference in New York City. Closing arguments in the hush money trial today. Jury instructions expected on Wednesday, and the jury could start deliberating on Thursday. Both Congressman Bob Good, Republican from Virginia, and his primary challenger, State Senator John McGuire, recently appeared with Donald Trump to support him for the hush money trial in New York City. Today, Donald Trump endorsed John McGuire. Writing on Truth Social, Bob Good is bad for Virginia and bad for the USA. He turned his back on our incredible movement and was constantly attacking and fighting me until recently when he gave a warm and loving endorsement, but really it was too late. The damage had been done. I just want to make America great again, and the person that can most help me do that is Navy SEAL and highly respected state legislator John McGuire, a true American hero. Bob Good is currently the chair of the conservative House Freedom Caucus. Washington Examiner article writes, Bob Good first crossed Donald Trump by backing Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican of Florida, for the GOP presidential nomination early last year before reversing course after the Florida governor suspended his campaign. But Trump's campaign was quick to suggest that such a move could be fatal to Bob Good's reelection. The Democratic National Committee announced today that President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris will be nominated by DNC delegates virtually prior to the party's convention, August 19th through the 22nd in Chicago. And that's in order to meet Ohio's requirement of a nomination by August 7th to get on that state's general election ballot. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, a Republican, called a special session to try to pass a legislative fix. But the version the state Senate was passing included unrelated provisions put in by Republicans, rejected by Ohio's Senate Democrats. Here's some of the debate from today's special session in Columbus. State Senator Sandra O'Brien, Republican.
We find ourselves here today in special session. Why? Well, according to the Ohio chairman of the Democratic Party, in her press release, she claimed that it was because of corrupt elected Republican officials. I repeat, corrupt Republican politicians, Really, Madam Chairman. Let me make it clear to everyone. We are here as senators in this session today because of one person's incompetence and inability to read a calendar. Somebody can't follow directions. The Democrat Party chairman has failed to get her president of the United States on the ballot. And this is supposed to be the Republicans' fault. This is because of corrupt Republican politicians. Sorry, Madam Chairman, don't blame us when you have failed to do your job. You messed this up. This is your fault. Own it.
Ohio State Senator Sandra O'Brien, Republican, at the special session today in Columbus. Also talking about this bill, this legislative fix bill, and the amendments being offered to it. State Senator Paula Hicks Hudson, a Democrat.
I rise to speak to the bill, to the amendment, and to the fact that we are here unnecessarily because we choose not to do our jobs. Whether we take some comment from outside of this chamber, such as the chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, or we look at the National Democratic Party, the fact is that we are here today because we, as legislators, not only in this chamber, but in the House's chamber, refuses to take up what I think would have been a very simple fix a long time ago, but instead we have been playing politics. I spent the entire weekend talking to my constituents about, and they're asking, what is going on with us here in Columbus? Not DC, not someplace else, but here, us as elected officials, what are we doing? How are we representing them?
State Senator Paula Hicks Hudson, a Democrat, at the special session in Columbus today. After a bill to fix the ballot date issue did not pass, Democratic National Committee Chair Jamie Harrison said in a statement announcing their solution. Again, the solution is a virtual DNC delegate roll call and nomination earlier than the in-person DNC convention in late August, doing the virtual one in time to qualify for Ohio's ballot for the general election under existing law. Jamie Harrison writing, Joe Biden will be on the ballot in Ohio and all 50 states. And Ohio Republicans agree, but when the time has come for action, they have failed to act every time, so Democrats will land this plane on their own. And an article at democracydocket.com reads, the DNC ran into a similar situation in Alabama and Washington. In Alabama, lawmakers passed special legislation to allow Biden, who was already the presumptive Democratic nominee, to appear on the ballot, while Washington's Secretary of State indicated that Biden will be allowed on the ballot so long as the DNC submits a provisional certificate of nomination. From Politico, the Libertarian Party selected former Georgia Senate candidate Chase Oliver as their presidential nominee on Sunday, spurning appeals for support over the weekend from both Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We'll be talking with Politico reporter Brittany Gibson in just a few minutes about the just concluded Libertarian Party convention in Washington. First, presidential nominee Chase Oliver on Sunday.
Now, after this convention, I will continue to travel around and bring a hopeful and positive message of liberty to both those who consider themselves libertarian and those who don't know they're libertarian yet. That's what happened to John Mons when I met him in 2010. He waved me into the libertarian tent, and the most important thing he said to me was, "Welcome home to liberty." Ladies and gentlemen of the Libertarian Party, we can set the world free in our lifetimes, but it will take all of us. And I just want to quote the late Dr. Mark Feldman as he challenged us at our 2016 convention. "I need those of you that are be what you want to be libertarians. I need those good-looking on TV libertarians. I need those Christian libertarians and the atheist libertarians. I need the Jefferson libertarians and the Ron Paul libertarians. I need the Gary Johnson libertarians, the Joe Jorgensen libertarians, the Dave Smith libertarians, and all of the libertarians." Absolutely. I want to speak a little bit about the policies I'm going to be pushing forward as I travel across this country. First and foremost, I got my start in this political activism opposing the war in Iraq. I got started here in this city of DC where my first anti-war protest was. If you question that I can handle the state, make no mistake, I have stood feet away from riot police as they hold batons, riot shields, ready to bash our skulls in, and still I spit in their face and said, "No more war." And so with that, I urge an end to all wars, all foreign funding of proxy wars, and of course, I want to bring our troops home, and we start that by supporting Defend the Guard legislation in every state across this country. I also know the crippling effects of inflation in this country. I know what it means to go to the grocery store with the same amount of money, but less and less keeps ending up in the shopping cart. That is the reality for millions of American families all over this country. And I want to fight this inflation by saying no new printed money out of nowhere, in this broken monetary policy, end the Fed, and support alternative currencies like Bitcoin, and absolutely, with every fiber in my being, opposing CBDCs. Lastly, I want to talk about the people I want to represent. I want to represent those people who are trying to raise a family in this economy. I want to represent the Josh Smiths of the world who have children, and they need to know that they're going to have a better world for their children in the future. I want to support the spirit of entrepreneurship in this country, like a guy like Lars Mapstead, who can start from nothing and make himself into a true American success story. When we free our market and free up voluntary exchange, we will have more successful entrepreneurs in the world.
Libertarian Party presidential nominee Oliver Chase at the National Convention in Washington on Sunday. Brittany Gibson, Politico's politics reporter, covered the Libertarian Convention and joined us now on the phone. Thanks for being with us. Let's start with, who is Oliver Chase?
Most of your listeners will probably better know him as the Libertarian candidate in Georgia's Senate race in 2022. He got about 2% of the vote, which ended up forcing the runoff between Senator Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker last year. Other than that, he's a longtime Libertarian Party member and is now their 2024 presidential nominee.
You wrote that it took 8 hours and 7 rounds of voting. What was it like being there for that time?
It was an incredible demonstration of politics in real time. The Libertarian Party, like any other in the U.S., has its factions, has its divisions, and you could see it playing out on their convention floor. What's unique about their convention versus the two major parties is their state delegates, once they're selected to go to the national convention, are unbound. So everyone is free to vote as they please once they get to the convention. They're not tied to any one candidate. And they have a system where the candidate, in order to win, needs to get 50% plus one vote. And just it so happened with the number of candidates proposed, again, all coming from these different factions, it took 8 hours. It took a full work day, and they continued many hours in both directions of just voting for their presidential nominee, and 7 rounds altogether.
A lot has been made of the Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. speeches at the convention. How did they come about, and what was the impact of them?
Well, the impact depends on who you ask. Some people were more open to having outside speakers at the convention than others. Obviously, the benefit was increased media attention, increased attention to the Libertarian Party as a whole. They'd never before had a former president speak at their convention. So Donald Trump making an appearance, despite the fact that he was booed and heckled and jeered almost his entire speech, was pretty profile raising for the party. Some people feared, including Chase Oliver himself, he said in an interview with me that he feared that it would distract too much from their own presidential candidates. But I think it was a very unifying moment for the Libertarian Party. As I just said, they had all of their divisions laid out bare when they were picking their presidential nominee. But when Trump spoke, they were pretty unified, although unified against him.
We're talking with Brittany Gibson, Politico's politics reporter. Libertarian Party is fairly well established, but what are their prospects in 2024?
Well, success for any third party, I've learned covering this beat, is not always about winning or losing your races. Sometimes it's just about pushing your issue, getting your policy agenda more visibility. So for the Libertarian Party in the presidential race, historically, they've gotten between, 0.5% to 1%. Their high watermark was Gary Johnson in 2016, who got about 3.3% of the national vote. So those are the metrics for success. But outside of that, they're focused on growing their membership and dues-paying members, maintaining ballot access in as many states as possible. If in some states, as long as you get about 1 or 2% of the vote share within that state, you can keep your party line for the next election, which helps them run more candidates and continue getting attention for the issues they care about most.
And finally, conventions are often raucous affairs. During the days that you were there, what's one good story about something you saw and that you just couldn't believe you saw it?
Oh, that's a great question. I think what I will never forget is the feeling in the room when Trump spoke. So Trump was allowed to bring about 200 of his own supporters into the ballroom where he had his speech. But of course, because it was a Libertarian Party convention, there were many, many more of them and their delegates as well as members who just decided to travel out. And the energy in that room, and I just happened to be sitting in the middle of the two sets of fans, coincidentally. So the energy you felt in that room, the tension and political division, and in real politics in real time, almost directly responding to Trump and what he was saying on both sides, the supporters and opposition, was incredibly electric. And I believe it was minimally, there was minimal conflict. I didn't see it myself, but I heard one story of someone being pulled out. But besides that, just the chanting and cheering was unforgettable, unlike any other political event I've seen in the last few years.
Brittany Gibson, Politico's politics reporter. You can find her stories at Politico.com and on X at Brittany A. Gibson. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And C-SPAN's cameras were also at the Libertarian National Convention, and you can find all the video at our video library, cspan.org. New York Times reported last week that Nigel Farage, the broadcaster and populist politician who championed Brexit, said he would not run for a seat in the British Parliament in a general election on July 4th, preferring to focus on helping former President Donald J. Trump recapture the White House in November. Well, today, Nigel Farage held a news conference in Dover, England, to introduce the candidate for Parliament from Farage's Reform UK party for that seat, and he was asked about the U.S. presidential election.
The American election is important for this reason. The world is in a worse place, a more dangerous place than it's been at any point since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and even I wasn't born when that happened. Strong American leadership, standing up to bullies, and leading a strong NATO are absolutely vital for our national security. And I believe the world was a much better, safer place with Donald Trump in the White House than it's been with Joe Biden. So that's the context. I'm not saying Britain doesn't matter. Far from it. Of course not. I'm British. I'm here. But I do think who wins in America for global safety is absolutely vital. I genuinely do.
Do you become a Trump advisor if he's re-elected?
I wouldn't become an official Trump advisor if he was elected. Unofficially, well, look, he's a friend of mine. He's a friend of mine. And wouldn't it be nice to have a pro-British president back in the White House rather than one that absolutely loathes us?
British politician Nigel Farage at a news conference in Dover, England, answering a question about why he himself is not standing for election in the general election in Great Britain July 4th. Washington Today continues in a moment.
The House will be in order.
This year, C-SPAN celebrates 45 years of covering Congress like no other. Since 1979, we've been your primary source for Capitol Hill, providing balanced, unfiltered coverage of government, taking you to where the policy is debated and decided, all with the support of America's cable companies. C-SPAN, 45 years and counting, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Story from NBC News, Palestinians searching through the charred remains described a horrifying scene of people running to escape the blaze that swept through a tent camp in Rafah as Israeli forces pushed deeper into the southern Gaza city Tuesday despite mounting global condemnation. Israeli tanks reached the city center for the first time, according to NBC News crew on the ground, defying international pressure to halt an offensive that has sent nearly 1 million people fleeing Rafah and left those still sheltering there facing dire conditions and deadly attacks. Palestinians who survived Sunday's strike, which local officials said killed at least 45 people in an area where displaced civilians were sheltering in tents, described a desperate bid to escape the blaze, while others sought to identify their loved ones among the remains. That was from NBC News. A spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces, Daniel Hagari, held a virtual news conference today saying the fire could not have come from the relatively small munitions used by Israel to target two Hamas officials not near the tents where families were living.
Despite our efforts to minimize civilian casualties during the strike, the fire that broke out was unexpected and unintended. This is a devastating incident which we did not expect. We're investigating what caused the fire that resulted in this tragic loss of life. The investigation is ongoing. I will now share the facts that we've gathered so far. As you can see, in our aerial surveillance from the time of the strike, we targeted a closed structure away from tent area. As you can see, there are no tents in the immediate vicinity of the structure that we targeted. Contrary to reports, we conducted the strike outside the area that we designated as a humanitarian area and called civilians to evacuate to. Our strike was over 1.5 kilometers away from the El Muasi humanitarian area, what we call the safer zone. Here is where Hamas claims we struck. And here is where we conducted our strike against the Hamas senior commanders outside the area designated as a humanitarian area. Our aerial surveillance was filming prior to the strike in order to minimize civilian harm. Here is the footage from our strike of the specific structure where the senior Hamas commanders were meeting. The strike was conducted using 2 munitions with small warheads suited for this targeted strike. We're talking about munition with 17 kilos of explosive material. This is the smallest munition that our jets can use. Following this strike, a large fire ignited for reasons that are still being investigated. Our munition alone could not have ignited a fire of this size. I want to repeat it. Our munition alone could not have ignited a fire of this size. Our investigation seeks to determine what may have caused such a large fire to ignite. We are looking into all possibilities, including the option that weapons stored in a compound next to our target, which we did not know of, may have ignited as a result of the strike.
Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson Daniel Hagari during a virtual news conference. Again, from the NBC News article, the Sunday strike came hours after Hamas's military wing announced a missile barrage targeting Tel Aviv for the first time in many weeks, with the IDF saying 8 projectiles were identified crossing from the Rafah area into Israeli territory. Some U.S. reaction to the airstrike. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Democrat from Michigan, posting on X, "This was intentional. You don't accidentally kill massive amounts of children and their families over and over again and get to say it was a mistake." Genocidal maniac Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told us he wants to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. When are you going to believe him? President Joe Biden. And Vice President Kamala Harris, asked about it, said the word tragic doesn't even begin to describe it. The White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby held a news conference today at the White House.
So I just want to, right off the top, talk about these devastating images and reports coming out of Rafah over the weekend following an IDF strike that killed dozens of innocent Palestinians, including children. And you've all seen the images. They're heartbreaking. They're horrific. There should be no innocent life lost here as a result of this conflict. Israel, of course, has a right to go after Hamas. And we understand that this strike did kill 2 senior Hamas terrorists who are directly responsible for attacks against the Israeli people. But, as we've also said many times, Israel must take every precaution possible to do more to protect innocent life. As soon as we saw these reports over the weekend about the strike, we reached out to the Israeli Defense Forces at various levels to gather more information, and we've been actively engaged with the IDF and with partners on the ground to learn more about what happened. I'll note that the Israeli Defense Forces today released initial findings that point to the fire being caused by a secondary explosion, not the initial strike. I think this speaks very clearly to the challenge of military airstrikes in densely populated areas of Gaza, including Rafah, because of the risk of civilian casualties, which of course happened terribly in this case. A horrible loss of life. We're glad that the Israeli Defense Forces are doing a full investigation, which we believe is going to be very important to try to prevent future such mishaps. With that, I can take some questions.
All right, head on there. Thanks, Admiral. Can you explain how the strike in Rafah does not cross the lines that the president has set and many of you have repeated, that the operations be targeted and limited?
We still don't believe that a major ground operation in Rafah is warranted. We still don't want to see the Israelis, as we say, smash into Rafah with large units over large pieces of territory. We still believe that, and we haven't seen that at this point. But we're going to be watching this, of course, very, very closely. I want to just end this answer by making it very clear that regardless, every single loss of innocent life is tragic, and every single loss of innocent life should be prevented as much as possible.
Has the president seen the images?
I don't know. I can't speak to what he has absolutely been. He's been kept apprised throughout the weekend on this.
So you're saying the tent encampment that was first struck is considered a densely populated area?
The whole area of Rafah, Ed, is densely populated. Now, there has been 1 million or so who have evacuated Rafah proper, but it's not like they're going all that far away. The whole area is densely populated.
So how does this not violate the red line that the president laid out?
As I said, we don't want to see a major ground operation. We haven't seen that at this point.
How many more charred corpses does he have to see before the president considers a change in policy?
We don't want to see a single more innocent life taken. And I kind of take a little offense at the question. No civilian casualties is the right number of civilian casualties. And this is not something that we've turned a blind eye to, nor has it been something we've ignored or neglected to raise with our Israeli counterparts, including, Ed, this weekend as a result of this particular strike. Now, they're investigating it, so let's let them investigate it and see what they come up with.
John Kirby, White House National Security Communications Advisor, in the White House briefing room today with reporters. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres writing on X, "I condemn Israel's actions, which killed scores of innocent civilians who were only seeking shelter from this deadly conflict. There is no safe place in Gaza. This horror must stop." The UN Security Council scheduled an emergency closed meeting this afternoon on the situation in Rafah at the request of Algeria, the Arab representative on the council. From Sky News, the U.S. military has been forced to suspend aid deliveries into Gaza by sea after its temporary pier system has been damaged by bad weather, according to 3 officials. The United Nations U.S. and Israeli official told Sky News' U.S. partner network NBC that the damage was to a causeway, a type of track that's attached to the beach in Gaza. Aid is taken onto the causeway by small boats after being unloaded on the massive floating dock. The UN officials said it could take a week to repair. The Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh had more on this at today's Pentagon news conference.
On Saturday, May 25th, 4 U.S. Army vessels supporting the maritime humanitarian aid mission in Gaza were affected by heavy sea states, causing these motorized pier sections, which are used to stabilize the Trident Pier, to break free from their anchors due to a loss in power and subsequently beach ashore. As of today, one of the Army vessels that was beached on the coast of Israel near Ascalon has been recovered. The second vessel that was also beached near Ascalon will be recovered in the next 24 hours, and the remaining 2 vessels that were beached near the Trident Pier are expected to be recovered in the next 48 hours. Efforts to recover the vessels are underway with the assistance from the Israeli Navy. In addition, due to high sea states and a North African weather system, earlier today, a portion of the Trident Pier separated from the pier that is currently anchored into the coast of Gaza. As a result, the Trident Pier was damaged and sections of the pier need rebuilding and repairing. Therefore, over the next 48 hours, the Trident Pier will be removed from its anchored position on the coast and towed back to Ashdod, where U.S. Central Command will conduct repairs. The rebuilding and repairing of the pier will take at least over a week, and following completion will need to be re-anchored to the coast of Gaza. The pier proved highly valuable in delivering aid to the people of Gaza. Thus, upon completion of the pier, repair and reassembly, the intention is to re-anchor the temporary pier to the coast of Gaza and resume humanitarian aid to the people who need it most. To date, over 1,000 metric tons have been delivered from the pier to the marshalling area for onward delivery by humanitarian organizations and into the hands of Palestinians. Alongside our USAID teammates, we remain committed to working with the international community to get aid into Gaza as quickly as possible. And as we have more information and more updates, we'll be sure to pass that along.
The Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh at her news conference in the Pentagon. Spain, Norway, and Ireland formally recognized a Palestinian state today in a coordinated move. Associated Press article reads, while around 140 countries have recognized the Palestinian state, more than 2/3 of the United Nations, none of the major Western powers has done so. Still, the adherence of 3 European countries to the group represents a victory for Palestinian efforts in the world of public opinion and will likely put pressure on European Union heavyweights France and Germany to rethink their position. That was from AP. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez gave a televised address from Madrid.
Good morning. I would like to inform you that at the meeting of the Council of Ministers that will be held today, the government of Spain will approve the official recognition of Palestine as a state. With this decision, Spain joins the more than 140 countries that already recognize Palestine. This is a historic decision that has a single goal: to contribute to achieving peace between Israelis and Palestinians. The recognition of the state of Palestine is not only a matter of historical justice with the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people, but it is also an imperative need to achieve peace. It is the only way to realize the solution that we all recognize as the only possible one to achieve a future of peace, that of a Palestine state that coexists alongside the state of Israel in peace and security. The state of Palestine must be viable, with the West Bank and Gaza connected by a corridor and with East Jerusalem as its capital, and must be unified under the legitimate government of the Palestine National Authority. Although it is not up to Spain to define the borders of other countries, our position is aligned with the UN Security Council resolutions 242 and 338, and with the position of the European Union. Therefore, we won't recognize change in the 1967 lines other than those agreed to by the parties. It is also essential that Palestine finds its adequate place in the international community. That is why Spain will continue to support efforts to strengthen Palestine's presence in international organizations. The recognition of Palestine is not against anyone, least of all Israel, a friendly nation that Spain values and holds in high regard, and with whom we aim to foster the strongest possible relationship. Furthermore, this decision reflects our absolute rejection of Hamas, a terrorist organization who is against the two-state solution. From the outset, Spain has strongly condemned the terrorist attacks of October 7. This clear condemnation is the resounding expression of our steadfast commitment in the fight against terrorism.
The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez making a televised address in Madrid and then posting the video online. The leaders of Norway and Ireland also making similar announcements of recognizing the Palestinian state today. Israel's Foreign Minister Israel Katz writing on X that the Spanish government is guilty of being complicit in inciting genocide against Jews and war crimes. Turning to the war in Ukraine, a story from Reuters, the United States and its partners are prepared to use sanctions and export controls to prevent China-Russia trade that threatens their security amid the ongoing Ukraine war, a White House official said on Tuesday. The White House Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economics, Dalip Singh, said the countries could take further action to increase the cost of Russia using a shadow fleet to evade the Group of 7 countries' oil price cap. They could also broaden current sanctions language regarding financial facilitation, given Moscow's moves to shift its economy to war footing. Singh said as well, the G7 leaders summit next month was the best chance to shore up Ukraine's financing gap by working out a plan to monetize around $300 billion in frozen Russian assets, a move he said was risky but necessary. That was from Reuters. C-SPAN covered this program. Here's Dalip Singh at the Brookings Institution in Washington, answering an audience question about those frozen Russian assets.
Andrea Shalal with Reuters. Hi, good to see you. I think I heard you say that seizing the Russian assets or monetizing them in some way could be risky. And this has obviously been a source of contention among the G7 partners. Can you tell us where you think you are now, whether you think you're closer to some kind of an agreement with the Europeans on this? It does seem like those indicators are there.
I mean, here's the situation. We thanks to Congress, and we really do appreciate it, we now have the authority in the United States to seize the principal of the sovereign assets that we immobilized and transfer the value to Ukraine. That would be the most efficient and potent option available for all of us in the G7. But seizing principal is a red line for many of our G7 partners. Whether you use the theory of countermeasures or whether you use a legal theory of set-off in which Ukraine establishes a reparation claim, transfers it to the asset side of the G7 balance sheet, and we set that off against our collective liability, which are the Russian reserves. In either path, we don't have consensus as a G7. So the question strategically is, do you just wait and hope that we get consensus? And our belief is that no, you don't wait and hope. The situation in Ukraine is difficult. It's dire. You see the situation with air defenses, manpower, the energy infrastructure. So if we have a way to act with solidarity and with speed and an appreciable scale, which I would define as at least $50 billion, that's what you're supposed to do. And I think we have an option on the table for our G7 leaders to consider in Apulia that will allow us to act in precisely that way. It's speed with scale and with solidarity, which has been our greatest strength throughout. And really, it's the financial support it provides, but also the signal to Putin that we're not going to fatigue, and he's not going to outlast us, regardless of what happens in the remainder of the year.
Dalip Singh, White House Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economics, today at the Brookings Institution. The leaders of the G7, or a group of 7 leading democracies, are scheduled to meet in Italy June 13th through 15th. Wall Street today, the Dow down 216, NASDAQ up 99, S&P up 1. CBS News reports that T-Mobile, the nation's second biggest mobile carrier, plans to acquire most of U.S. Cellular in an acquisition worth $4.4 billion, the wireless carriers announced on Tuesday. The deal involves cash and as much as $2 billion in debt, with Bellevue, Washington-based T-Mobile buying 30% of U.S. Cellular's spectrum assets, as well as the regional carrier's customer accounts and retail stores. U.S. Cellular customers will be allowed to keep their current plans or switch to a T-Mobile plan. The company said the transaction is expected to close in the middle of next year, pending regulatory approvals. That was from CBS News. A New York Times headline back in April read that physical fitness linked to better mental health in young people. The subhead: a new study bolsters existing research suggesting that exercise can protect against anxiety, depression, and attention challenges. That was the subject of a discussion today at the National Press Club with the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, the Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary for Health, Dr. Rachel Levine. A representative from the NBA was there as well. Here is Doug Emhoff.
As second gentleman, I have hosted events all over the world to help improve youth mental health through sports, including partnering with the NBA at a youth basketball clinic in Ghana. I participated in a fireside chat with WNBA players to uplift women in sports during All-Star Weekend. And I've collaborated with a nonprofit called Kaboom, which is great, they're right here in Baltimore, on ensuring there's equity in play space, making sure that play space is available to all children. Sports, and I've seen this all over the country, I've seen it all over the world, sports plays such a unique and critical role in uniting our country and our world. Sports brings us together. Sports has the ability to bring people together and encourage us to live active and healthier lives. For young people, participation in sports and other physical activity is crucial to success on so many levels. Kids who are in sports, and it's been shown, are less likely to be anxious or depressed. They're more likely to feel more connected to their communities, have better social skills, and more positive academic outcomes. So it's all good. They've helped me. I was an athlete growing up, obsessed with sports, and still am. And I cannot tell you how much it's helped me in my career as a lawyer, and even doing this with the confidence to be able to go around the country, go around the world, and to be able to talk in front of people. I get a lot of that because I played a lot of sports. So there you go.
Doug Emhoff, husband to Vice President Kamala Harris, at the National Press Club today, a program looking at the effects of exercise on mental health. Also there, Admiral Rachel Levine, a medical doctor, Assistant Secretary for Health, and a representative from the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition, as well as the NBA's Social Responsibility, Player Programs, and Diversity and Inclusion Communications Director. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, word for word, and you'll get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.